Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the St. Louis Rams in their Week 15 matchup played December 17th, 2015. We're going to go over every possession and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis for this Thursday night football game. So these teams, both of them really out of it for the playoffs. Of course, the Bucs not quite mathematically eliminated, but with the loss last week, that pretty much put them out of it, and a loss this week would eliminate them from the playoff hunt. And the Rams, of course, this was their final game at home this season, potentially the final game in St. Louis, although that remains to be seen. I don't necessarily think they're going to LA, but you never know. But anyway, in this game, the Rams would get the ball first, and they got a pretty good return on the kickoff as they had some pretty good special teams all night long. But here, Cunningham would bring the ball out to the St. Louis 43 on a 44-yard return. So good field position for St. Louis to start this game off. And Todd Gurley started running the ball good early on with a 6-yard run, although he didn't have a lot of yards by the end of the game. But on a 2nd and 4 from the 49, Case Keenum went to Kendricks. He picked up 11 yards and a first down in Tampa Bay territory at the 40. Then on 2nd and 7 from the 37, Keenum went to Todd Gurley. He picked up 19 yards and a first down at the Tampa Bay 18. So now in the red zone, and on 2nd and 9 from the 17, Case Keenum goes to Tavon Austin, and he gets in the end zone for a 17-yard touchdown. Greg Zuerlein hit the extra point, and it was 7-0 St. Louis over Tampa Bay. So now the Bucs would take over after the kickoff, and there was a touchback, so they started with it on their own 20, but after 7 plays, they would end up punting from the 50. So now the Rams would take over for the second time in this game, but they would be held to a 3-and-out, and so they would end up punting the ball from their own 15. So now Tampa Bay would take over on their own 39 after the punt. Winston went to Humphries. He picked up 10 yards and a first down at the 49. So now at midfield, they give it to the muscle hamster, Doug Martin. He runs for 12 yards and a first down in St. Louis territory at the 39. And then on 3rd and 6, an incomplete pass would bring out Connor Barth to attempt a 53-yard field goal. It was up, it was good as the Bucs put their first points on the board as they now trailed by 4 with the score St. Louis 7, Tampa Bay 3. So now St. Louis on the kickoff would end up getting it to the 18-yard line. Not their best return of the night, but they would get quite a good return later on. But here, starting off on the 18 on an end around, they gave it to Tavon Austin. He picked up 15 yards and a first down at the 33. Then on 2nd and 3 from the 40, Case Keenum airs it out for Kenny Britt, and he takes it into the end zone, a 60-yard touchdown. Greg Zuerlein added the extra point, and it was now 14-3 as the Rams extended their lead to 11 with about 3 minutes still left in the first quarter. So now the Bucs would get the ball after the touchback on the kickoff on their own 20, and they would end up losing yards on this possession due to a penalty, and they would end up punting from the 17. So they went 3-and-out, and now the Rams would take over with about a minute and a half left in the first quarter. They would bring the first quarter to a close with the ball up near midfield, but after 4 plays on this possession and 2 plays into the second quarter, they would end up punting from their own 47. So now Tampa Bay would take over backed up against their own end zone on their own 4-yard line, and they would end up getting out of the shadow of their end zone. They would bring the ball up to midfield when Jameis Winston on a first down from the 36 went to Mike Evans for a 19-yard reception and got the ball across midfield into St. Louis territory at the 45. And then on a 3rd and 6 from the 28, Winston scrambled for 5 yards. They were just a yard shy of the first down. So now the Bucs would take a timeout at the midway point in the second quarter with 7.5 left before halftime. It was a 4th and 1 on the St. Louis 23. And instead of going for the field goal, they elected to go for it. and they gave it to Martin. He lost 2 yards, and so the Bucs, instead of coming away with 3 points, they turned the ball over on downs. So now the Rams, after that big stop with the defense, they took over on their own 25. They didn't waste too much time moving the ball to midfield and into Tampa territory. They got all the way down into the red zone due to a penalty and unnecessary roughness call. And so now, and that was something that really would hurt the Bucs in this game, was a lot of costly penalties right when anytime it seemed as if they were about to be back in the game, they would end up doing something to hurt themselves or to help St. Louis, either way you look at it. But now the Rams would get down all the way to the 3-yard line after Gurley had a 2-yard run. Then Keenum went to Cook for a 7-yard pass, and it was 3rd and 1 on the 3. They gave it to Todd Gurley, and Gurley gets it into the end zone, a 3-yard touchdown run. Greg Zuerlein hits the extra point, and it was now 21-3. St. Louis extending their lead to 18 points, just over 2 minutes left in the first half. So now Tampa Bay would take over after the touchback on the kickoff on their own 20. They would bring the game to the 2-minute warning, but they would be held to a 3-and-out on the possession and would end up punting from their own 14. So the Rams would take over, and Case Keenum ended up getting sacked by Jones and McCoy, and they ended up just running out the clock and bringing an end to the first half. So 21-3, St. Louis in the lead at halftime. The first half was all Rams. This game was pretty much over after the first half, just the way they had jumped out to that lead. We'll go more into it after we go over the second half recap, but to start off the second half, the Bucs would get the ball first. They started with it on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff. They moved the ball up to midfield, and then a penalty would move them back, but they still kept going. They got into St. Louis territory. They got down into the red zone, and then on a 2nd and 7 from the 20, Winston went to Stocker, and he ended up picking up 14 yards. And so then now it was a 1st and goal at the 6. Then on 2nd and goal, they got a penalty for a delay of game that pushed them back to the 14. And that would pretty much kill their drive, as they would end up having to settle for a 32-yard field goal. So they get down into the red zone on their first possession coming out of halftime, but come away with just 3 points. And now it was St. Louis 21-6 as the Bucs cut into the lead and got it down to 2 scores, as it was a 15-point game. So 2 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion would tie it at that point. But the Rams had other ideas, as they would end up getting the ball after the kickoff. They'd start off on their own 17, and on 2nd and 1 from the 26, Case Keenum went to Jared Cook. He picked up 25 yards, and then there was a penalty, but it was declined. And so now it was a 1st down at midfield at the Tampa Bay 49. And then on 2nd and 11 from the 50, Keenum went back to Cook. He picked up 15 yards and a 1st down at the 35. Keenum then went to Tavon Austin. He picked up 11. Now it was 1st down at the 24. And on 2nd and 7 from the 21, they give it to Tavon Austin on an end around, and he runs it into the end zone for a 21-yard touchdown. So Tavon Austin, his 2nd touchdown of the game, and Zuerlein added the extra point to make it 28-6. So now they're up by 3 scores, 22 points. And that was with about 5.5 minutes still left in the third. So now Tampa Bay would take over after the kickoff on their own 14, and they would get a 1st down, and they would get into St. Louis territory after a couple 1st downs on this drive. But on 1st and 10 from the St. Louis 45, Jameis Winston fumbles the ball, recovered by Worthington for the Rams, as it was actually a botched transaction there on the snap. But the Rams would take over at the 46 after the fumble. They got into Tampa Bay territory, and they would end up actually bringing the third quarter to a close, but they would end up punting the ball from the Tampa Bay 38 in the second play of the 4th quarter. So now the Bucs would take over, as they were down by 3 scores at this point. They started off on their own 2-yard line, backed up against their own end zone. Winston went to Evans. He picked up 20 yards and a 1st down at the 22. Winston goes back to Evans. He picks up 30 yards. Now the Bucs are in Rams territory at the St. Louis 48. Then Winston goes to die, and Dye almost looks like he got into the end zone, but not quite, but no one had touched him, and he ends up just dropping the ball, but it's actually a fumble because the ball's still live, but Stocker with a heads-up play, number 88, gets on the ball, and so now it would be a first down on the St. Louis 3-yard line. So it was originally a 47-yard pass, but he wasn't down and he fumbled, and so then the ball went back a couple yards. Stocker gets it, and then he gets tackled, and so instead of being right there on basically like the half-yard line, just the easy QB sneak to get it in, instead they're on the 3. So now on first and goal from the 3, Jameis Winston goes to Luke Stocker, and he gets the touchdown. So touchdown by Stocker, 3-yard pass from Winston. Connor Barth hits the extra point, and I believe they actually, I'm not sure if this was when they went for 2, but there was a penalty, so then they ended up going for 1. But either way, it was 28-13 at this point. Once again, a 15-point game. So now the Rams would take over with 13 minutes still left to play in this game. And on the kickoff, Cunningham runs it back 102 yards all the way to the 3-yard line, making some amazing moves, cutting across the field, really doing a great job of picking up his blockers. But eventually he would end up getting tackled by McDaniel down at the 3. It was a very exciting play. He almost ran it back all the way. He ran it back 102 yards. Just needed 3 more because obviously he took it from 5 yards deep in the end zone. But he came very close to scoring on that special teams play for a touchdown. But 102 yards on the play, 3 yards shy of the end zone. So then Gurley would pick up a yard and then get stuffed for no gain, and then pick up 1 more yard on 3rd and goal from the 2 as he would come up shy of the end zone. And so from the 1-yard line, after a 102-yard return on the kickoff, they couldn't get into the end zone, which was a good stop by the Bucs defense. But for the Rams, it wouldn't eventually cost them, but that's not a good thing if you can't get into the end zone there. But they would come away with 3 points as Greg Zuerlein hit a 19-yard field goal, and it was now 31-13 with about 10.5 still left to play in this game. So the Bucs still had some life at that point, although time was running out, and they would take over on their own 20 after the kickoff, and they would bring the ball into midfield and into St. Louis territory. Then on 2nd and 10 from the 48, Sims would run it 35 yards for a first down in the red zone at the St. Louis 13. Penalties would cost the Bucs, though, and they would have to settle for a 24-yard field goal by Connor Barth, and it was now 31-16 at the midway point in the 4th quarter with about 7.5 left to play. So now the Rams would take over after the kickoff, and they would be held to a 3-and-out as Smith ended up sacking Keenum on 2nd down. And so then on 4th down from the 21, the Rams would punt the ball back to the Bucs. So now Tampa Bay would take over after the punt on their own 31. Winston went to Mike Evans. He picked up 17 yards in the first down at the Tampa Bay 48. Then on 2nd and 4 from the 46, Winston went to Britt. He picked up 7 yards in the first down at the St. Louis 49. And on first down, Winston drops back looking for Evans, and he's intercepted by Trumaine Johnson. Trumaine Johnson had a pick 6 last week, but he comes up with the interception right here, and this one pretty much sealed the deal in this game. As the Bucs at this point, they needed to come down and score here if they were going to have any chance to come back in this game as time was running out on them. But with about 5 minutes left in the game, the Rams would take over after the interception. Tampa Bay's defense did force a 3-and-out by St. Louis, who would then punt from their own 36, and the Bucs would now take over with less than 4 minutes left to play and the ball on their own 19. They would get down into St. Louis territory, and they got into the red zone, but at this point, it was on the other side of the 2-minute warning, and on 2nd and 3 from the 9, Jameis Winston hit Austin Seraphin-Jenkins for the touchdown. Connor Barth added the extra point, and it was now 31-23. So it was an 8-point game at this point, but just a minute and a half left to play, and they would have to go for an onside kick. They would not recover, and so now the Rams took over, and all that was left to do was for Case Keenum to take 3 knees in the victory formation. As time would run out in this game, the Rams held on to win it. And the Rams, with the win, give kind of maybe what possibly could be a parting present to the hometown fans there in St. Louis. But now both teams are at 6-8 on the season. The Rams put another game above 500 on their home record, as their final home record in St. Louis for 2015 is 5-3. Of course, they've got 2 road games left to play to possibly bring their overall record up to 500. The Buccaneers, falling to 6-8 now, fall below 500 on the road. They're 3-4 on the road this season. Of course, they have 1 home game, 1 road game left to play. But in this game, the questionable play calling early on for the Bucs is you saw that they started off the game with 5 running plays, but by the time this game was over, Jameis Winston had thrown 50 passes, which was about twice as many passes as rushing plays in this game. So they just start off run the ball until you're down 21-3, and now it's pass. That's not how you win games. You got to have a balanced attack. On the other side, St. Louis, they started off really hot early on. Case Keenum looked better than he's ever looked in the pros in this game to start things off, as they were mixing it up. They were having a balanced attack, and they got up to a quick lead early on. They've got a strong defense, especially the Rams when they play with the lead. I mean, they've got a good pass rush. They were putting the pressure on Winston, which Winston actually had a really good game. He threw for a career-high 363 passing yards in this game, even under that pass rush. But, of course, a lot of that was in garbage time. But still, the Rams are a tough defense. They've got one of the best pass rushes in the league, especially Aaron Donald. But the Rams, they stayed committed to their running game. Todd Gurley didn't really have big numbers, especially on the ground. He did have that touchdown, but he only averaged just barely over 2 yards per carry, but they still kept feeding him the rock. Of course, at that point, a lot of that was due to the fact that they were up by so many points. They had the lead. They just kept running the ball to run the clock down. And then, of course, the Bucs know at this point, they're just going to keep handing off the ball as they got that big lead. But still, the Rams coming up big, and of course, Johnson coming up with that interception. Even though it didn't lead to any points, it did stop the Bucs from coming down and scoring. And eventually, as you saw, as the way things would turn out, it was a 1-score game at the end. But because of that interception by Johnson before it became a 1-score game, if that had led to a touchdown there, then the other touchdown would have put it within 1 point, or they would have went for 2, and they would have either converted or not converted. It would have maybe been a tie game down at the end. But with Johnson coming up with that big clutch play on defense, that really sealed the deal for the Rams, who pretty much, they were in control the whole game. They were in the lead the whole game. They jumped out to that first touchdown, and they never lost the lead. They never trailed at any point in this game. They looked pretty dominant in this game, especially up front. The Bucs, a tough road loss, but still, there's some bright things for the Bucs building toward the future. Also for the Rams, Case Keenum had a decent night, but he's obviously not the quarterback of the future for St. Louis. Even though in this game, he was 14 for 17, not asked to do a whole lot, but he did end up with 234 passing yards and 2 touchdowns on the night. And Todd Gurley, 21 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He also had 2 catches for 31 yards, as he ended up with 79 total yards on the game. But with the 48 rushing yards, even though he had such a low average, overall in the game, he did pass the 1,000-yard mark. So Todd Gurley going over 1,000 yards on the season here in his rookie campaign. Of course, he missed some games early on in the season. But Tavon Austin, he had a big night. He had 2 touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 1 through the air catching, as he had 4 carries for 32 yards on the ground with a touchdown rushing, and then he had 3 receptions for 41 yards and a touchdown receiving. So 2 total touchdowns and 73 total yards for Tavon Austin. Kenny Britt had 2 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown, and Jared Cook 4 receptions for 64 yards in this game. And for the Bucs, Jameis Winston, as I said, it was his career high passing yards. Of course, this is his rookie campaign, but He was 29 for 50, 363 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And of course, that's the thing. Like I said earlier, they didn't have him pass early. They were just running the ball so much, and then once they got down, then they put it all on Winston's shoulders, put it all on his arm rather, and then they just stopped running the ball at that point. And I mean, you're not going to win games when you become one-dimensional. But still, pretty good line for Winston, and said he's having a great year. As you saw right here in this game, 2 Rookie of the Year candidates in Jameis Winston and Todd Gurley. And they both came out with pretty big performances. And I mean, of course, the Rams won the game, but Winston actually ended up with a better stat line. Of course, what does that really mean? It's not about who has the best stats per se. It's about who wins and loses. But Winston definitely has a bright future ahead of him, and I believe he will lead the Bucs to plenty of wins in the future. And they're already a much better team with him under center as it is. But let's see, Doug Martin, 18 carries for 91 yards in this game for Doug Martin. He also had 1 reception for 6 yards, which gave him 97 total yards in the game. As he was doing a good job running the ball, just the play calling was really the big, question mark for me in this game. It was the thing that really led to the loss, as I'm not really keen on their offensive coordinator. But Sims had 7 carries for 50 yards, and Mike Evans 9 receptions for 157 yards. Of course, a lot of this production came when they were already down by quite a bit. Humphreys also had 6 receptions for 60 yards, and Dye had 1 reception for 44 yards. Austin, Surf, and Jenkins 3 receptions for 29 yards and a touchdown, and Stocker 3 receptions for 25 yards and a touchdown. Sims also had 3 catches for 22 yards to go along with his 50 yards rushing, which gave him 72 total yards on the game. Let me look at the kickers in this game. Greg Zuerlein was perfect, 1 for 1 on the field goals, 4 for 4 on the extra points. Barth was perfect as well, 3 for 3 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points. Of course, Barth also with that 53-yarder. Look at the defense in this game. Trumaine Johnson, his interception was huge for the defense of St. Louis. It really was the play that really sealed the deal, that really stopped that comeback attempt by the Bucs. Is Winston, I mean, he was fired up. He was leading them. He was trying to get him to that comeback, but Trumaine Johnson shut the door on him. And then for the Buccaneers, Smith had a sack, and Jones and McCoy each had a half a sack. Look at the team stats. 30 first downs for the Bucs, 16 first downs for the Rams. And on third down, the Bucs were 3 for 10, 30% conversion rate. They went for it once on fourth, did not convert. Of course, that did hurt them. And it hurt them throughout the whole game. If they could have came away with 3 points there, that would have had them like a little bit closer to where, you never know, that changes up things. But 2 for 10 on third downs for the Rams, 20%. Total net yards, 509 for Tampa, 319 for St. Louis. On the ground, the Bucs netted 146, as they had 5.4 yards per rushing play, and St. Louis netted 98 rushing yards. They only averaged 3 yards per rushing play, and Todd Gurley was like 2.25, if you want to maybe round it up to 2.3. But then you look at net passing yards in this game, 363 for Tampa. Winston not sacked at all, which goes to show his pocket presence, because that is one heck of a pass rush that the Rams do have. But he still was able to avoid the rush and avoid getting sacked, as they didn't get him at all. But for the Rams, they netted 221 through the air. Keenum was sacked twice, losing 13 yards total. Then we look at the penalties in this game. Not necessarily a lot of penalty yards, but costly penalties at costly times for the Bucs, as they had 9 penalties, 56 penalty yards, 5 penalties against the Rams, 35 yards. And those things, there was, when they got down close to the end zone, they started getting those penalties, and they were just the penalties at bad times, especially coming down the stretch. Seemed they were kind of losing their cool. But we look at the fumbles in this game. 2 fumbles by the Bucs. They lost one, recovered one. The Rams did not fumble at all. So they did a good job protecting the ball. But those 2 turnovers would be costly for the Buccaneers. When we look at the red zone in this game, 2 for 3 for St. Louis, 66%. 2 for 4 for Tampa Bay, 50%. Time of possession, 31 minutes and 20 seconds for the Bucs, 28 minutes, 40 seconds for the Rams. But these are 2 teams that, although they're below 500, I think they're both, headed in the right direction. They both have a lot of talent. They have good coaches up top. Although, like I said, I'm not really a big fan of the Bucs offensive coordinator. But it's a matter of, there's only so many offensive coordinators to go around, I guess, right? And so, and of course, obviously that guy's a better offensive coordinator than I would be, I guess. But, that doesn't, what excuse is that? I'm not an offensive coordinator, and he's not that great of one either. But, with the Rams, really the only thing they're missing is a quarterback. Although Keenum did play a decent game in a very limited role. They didn't really ask him to do too much. They were able to take advantage of good field position, good special teams by the Rams as well in this game. As Cunningham just kept making good returns. Of course, there was a 102-yard return, but even he was pretty consistent throughout the game with his returns, even early on with that 44-yard return. To set them up in nice field position right off the rip. And their defense, did the rest. So they took advantage of the situations with a good field position. They got their scores in. They got up to that good lead. And then they didn't really have to do too much on offense at that point there on out, as the Bucs were pretty much playing catch-up the rest of the game. Like I said, both these 2 teams definitely have something to build on towards next season. Of course, that's kind of been the story for both of these teams for the last couple years, but they keep amassing good talent. They've got a lot of good young talent on both of these teams. Like I said, the future does look bright for both of them. They just need a few little tweaks, and they could be right there in the hunt, in the mix of things, and contend for the playoffs. Not here in 2015, but in the future in 2016 and moving forward, especially with the bright young talents that they have with Winston with the Bucs and Gurley with the Rams, both of which, as long as they can stay healthy, can have some pretty long, good careers. And they're both, in my opinion, Pro Bowl caliber players. So it'll be interesting to see how things go moving forward. But let me know what you thought about this game, and let me know your thoughts and opinions overall. Definitely interested to read those in the comment section below. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and having a great week, and have a great weekend, and enjoy all the sports.